All right, today we are diving into one single, really intense chapter from the Bible, Mark chapter 11. Now, on the surface, it seems to have these two kind of disconnected stories, a strange miracle with a fig tree, and then this huge dramatic scene in a temple. But I promise you, they are woven together by one super powerful idea, the clash between image and reality. And it all really hinges on this one line. I mean, you read this and you think, wait, what? Why would Jesus curse a tree for not having fruit when the Bible itself says it wasn't even the right season? It seems so bizarre, maybe even unfair. But understanding this one little verse, that is the key to unlocking the entire chapter. Let's see how.
So the chapter kicks off with Jesus' famous entry into Jerusalem, the triumphal entry. Now, on the surface, it looks like a huge party, a big celebration. But the way he arrives completely flips the script on what everyone's image of a king's grand entrance was supposed to look like.
Okay, so you gotta picture this. When a conquering Roman general came home from a big victory, he'd ride through the city on a massive, powerful war horse, maybe even in a golden chariot. It was a spectacle of power and conquest. But Jesus, the king of everything, he shows up riding on a young donkey, a colt that had never even been ridden before. It is the absolute picture of humility, not military might.
And just look at this procession. There's no fancy red carpet. Nope. Instead, the people just spontaneously start creating this path of honor for him with their own clothes and with branches they're cutting from the fields, and they're shouting Hosanna, which is this passionate cry that basically means save us now. They're quoting from the Psalms, recognizing him as the one they've been waiting for.
But here, this is where we see that first huge clash between image and reality. To the crowd, this was a victory parade. Their king had finally arrived. But Jesus knew the truth. This road didn't lead to a palace. This was the road that led to the cross. The image was one of triumph, but the reality was all about sacrifice.
The very next day, the story takes a really strange turn. Jesus sees a fig tree, and what he does next, honestly, it seems totally out of character. But this isn't some random fit of anger. It's a living parable, acted out right in front of the disciples.
So we're right back to that central puzzle, and this verse has confused people for centuries. It seems so unfair, right? But the answer has nothing to do with Jesus being hangry or losing his temper. It's actually hidden in a little bit of botany, the biology of a specific Judean fig tree.
Okay, so check this out. With this particular kind of fig tree, something really unique happens. In the spring, around March or April, the leaves and the first little batch of edible figs, they're sometimes called tash, they appear at the exact same time. The main harvest, the big juicy figs, they come later in June. So here's the lesson. If Jesus saw a tree full of leaves, he had every reason to expect to find some of those early figs. The leaves were basically an advertisement that there should be fruit.
So you see, the tree had the image of life, but it had no substance. It was all show. It had the beautiful green leaves, but in reality, it was barren. It was basically false advertising. So Jesus wasn't just mad at a tree, he was creating this powerful object lesson about the danger of having the appearance of life without the reality of it.
In this theme, this powerful idea of image versus reality, it doesn't just stop with the tree. Oh no. Jesus immediately takes this lesson right to the very heart of Jewish spiritual life, the temple in Jerusalem. Now, to really get what happens next, you have to understand the layout of the temple. There's this huge outer courtyard called the Court of the Gentiles. And this was super important because it was the one and only place where non-Jews were allowed to come and pray. This was their designated space to connect with God.
The image of the temple, its whole purpose, was to be a house of prayer for all nations. That was the promise. But the reality that Jesus found, it was something else entirely. In his own words, he called it a den of robbers. The Court of the Gentiles, this sacred space for outsiders, had been turned into a noisy, chaotic marketplace. It was crammed with money changers and people selling animals. And this wasn't just an inconvenience. No, this was a profound injustice. They were physically and spiritually blocking the path for anyone not on the inside to approach God. The beautiful image of welcome had been totally replaced by a harsh reality of exclusion.
Well, as you can imagine, coming in and clearing out this entire marketplace made some very powerful people very, very angry. The religious leaders, the ones who had built this whole image of being the absolute spiritual authority, they came to challenge Jesus directly. They marched right up to him with this direct challenge. Who do you think you are? Who gave you the right to come in here and start flipping tables and acting like you're in charge? They are testing his authority, but the test is about to be turned right back on them.
Jesus, in his perfect wisdom, doesn't fall into their trap. He doesn't answer them directly. Instead, he asks them a question of his own, one about John the Baptist. And it is such a brilliant move because it puts them in an absolutely impossible position and exposes the empty reality behind their image of authority.
I mean, this question was a perfect trap. Look at their options. They were totally stuck. If they said John's authority came from God, Jesus would just say, well then why didn't you believe him? Which would make them look like hypocrites. But if they said it was just from man, they were terrified the crowd would riot because the people absolutely believed John was a prophet. Their fear of what people thought was greater than their desire for the truth.
So what do? They take the coward's way out. Their final answer is, we don't know. And that non-answer, it revealed everything. Their so-called authority wasn't about seeking God's truth, it was about public relations and protecting their own power. Once again, the image of spiritual leadership was completely hollow.
Okay, so a king on a donkey, a barren fig tree, a corrupted temple, and a bunch of hypocritical leaders. What is the big takeaway? How does this all tie together? And more importantly, what does it mean for us?
This is what brings it all home. That cursed fig tree was a living, breathing symbol for the spiritual state of the nation at the time. They had all the outward signs of religion: the beautiful temple, the priests in their robes, the sacrifices, the rituals. They had all the leaves, but they were missing the genuine fruit that comes from a heart that is truly connected to God.
So what does this fruit actually look like? Well, the Bible gives us a really clear picture. It's not about how perfectly you can perform religious duties. It's about the character that grows inside of you when you're in a real relationship with God. It's things like love, joy, peace, patience, all of these qualities that actually reflect who He is. This is the reality God is looking for, not just the outward appearance.
So this chapter, written 2,000 years ago, leaves us with a very personal, very modern challenge. It asks us to just stop and look at our own lives and ask a tough question. Are we more concerned with our image, with just having the leaves, the appearance of being a good person, of being religious or moral? Or are we actually cultivating the real fruit that only comes from a genuine connection with God? It's a reality check that's just as powerful today as it was back then.